After dropping at the end of last week, the stock has since rebounded. You can see up by about 2.25% right now. But joining us right now to talk more about it is Joanne Lipman. She's Yale University lecturer and a CNBC contributor, and she's out with a new op-ed about Spotify in Time. Joanne, Spotify has kind of made the argument that this is a free speech issue. You say that that is not something that really stands up at all.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Becky. Spotify is a much bigger problem than Joe Rogan at this point. And the reason is that it is trying to fall back on this sort of free speech issue. Daniel Ek came out and he said, you know, we don't want to be content censors. But the fact is that they are not content censors. Nobody is asking them to be content censors. This is a total straw man argument. People are basically saying if you're publishing misinformation, you need to be responsible for it. So, no, it's not a free speech issue at all. I think the real problem that we come down to is what is Spotify? And this is a problem that goes well beyond Joe Rogan, right? It's positioning itself by suggesting that it is some sort of neutral platform. We have creators. We want them to have creative freedom. And therefore, you know, we're sort of hands off, right? But in fact, when you look in the Joe Rogan situation, as we all know, they paid him a reported $100 million to have that content. So they have aligned themselves. They're paying for the content. There's really no daylight between Spotify, Joe Rogan. They are one. And this is where they really, really get into trouble. They are not some sort of neutral platform. They're not some sort of phone line. And the reason that I wrote the op-ed in Time, Time had approached me and they said, look, you've been an editor-in-chief at a number of places. If you're paying for content, what is your position? And the fact is that anybody in our business, Becky, anybody who's publishing, who's putting out content, it would be insane. It would be ludicrous for us to suggest that we're going to pay this huge premium for content that will be our billboard content. But then on the other hand, we're going to say, well, really don't have any responsibility for what they say.
This is very different than we're just a billboard or we are just a posting service. They have all kinds of podcasts that they allow to be put up. This is like Facebook, where people can post whatever content they want. They're not getting paid for it. But if you're paying somebody $100 million, very different story. I mean, this is why you see the controversy for somebody like Whoopi Goldberg and the comments she made about the Holocaust recently, that they're in big trouble because they're paying her to make these comments. That's why she's been taken off the air for 2 weeks.
Exactly. That's such a perfect analogy, Becky, because they're paying her, she's representing them. And by the way, the reason that I think this goes even beyond Spotify is because if you look at these other platforms that have always said, well, we are just the conduit for people to communicate, right? Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, all of them have started in one way or another also paying for content creators. And that, again, you know, this hasn't been tested in the courts. This really hasn't been navigated in a way that we really, really need to address, because there is now this sort of creep where these supposedly neutral platforms are now really getting into content, paying for content, and publishing content, which is a whole different ballgame than simply being a neutral conduit like a phone wire.